for staying with us in this hour. We're joined by Nakia White. She is the CEO Global Ladder Political Management. With us also our other analyst in studio this morning. We're joined by David Osiang, political analyst. Also with us is Brian Weke, who's a political analyst. We're also joined by Kimani Ngunjiri, Member of Parliament Bahati, and David Kosing, who's the Member of Parliament Pokot South. We'll be looking at news shaping the day across the country. But before that, Nakia, to you, we were talking earlier about the undertones that are coming from the NASA side of the political divide. They're not being clear about whether or not they plan to participate in the election, and now we're learning of a high-profile trip to the United Kingdom from the NASA presidential candidate. This is only 15 days to the polls. What's your interpretation of NASA saying that no elections if there are no reforms, and yet not coming out clearly to say whether or not they will be participating in the election?
I think it could be tantamount to political rhetoric, right? You have to be, at least for the country's sake, you have to be very clear about, you know, what your intention is. If you are going to boycott the polls, then be very clear about that, and don't kind of play hopscotch with language. And if you're going to participate in the polls, then participate in the polls. But certainly, I think that this is a bit of political wrangling and a political hostage, in a sense, around the election. So, I mean, we can only wait and tell to see, but I think that the Kenyan Constitution is very clear. If it's not an election where it's 50+1, or the counties don't vote where it's 50+1, then new elections have to be held in 30 days. So I think that that's very clear, and I think that at least that's something that they're probably holding very close to their vest. But either way, it's important to let your supporters know and the country know what's going to happen next. What's going to happen in October the 26th.
David, about holding the country hostage politically, Mheshimiwa Kosing here had earlier spoken about the 290 constituencies and the move by NASA to ask that some of their strongholds, some constituencies actually do not participate in this election. Your interpretation of that?
I actually don't believe my sister White when she thinks that the NASA leader is trying to hold the country hostage, and that he has been unclear. As a matter of fact, I bet the Prime Minister has actually been, the former Prime Minister has been very clear. I will not go into an election with the same characters that I feel, I suspect, you know, were accomplices in the irregularities or illegalities committed by IEBC in the election of the 8th. And so I don't think that's to hold the country hostage. If Raila Odinga today had to write a letter to say, I am not going to be participating formally, as I bet he will, then what will happen is that his support base, by and large, will not vote. The moment less than 290 constituencies vote, if even less than one, you know, if only one constituency opts out of the political process, then what we're going to end up with is no election happened, because the presidential tally cannot be tallied. He cannot achieve 50%+1, because that aggregate should be derived from a national poll. So whether he gets 50+1 and yet some constituencies have not voted would just add up to, you know, no election having happened at all. And I guess there are laws in this country that govern how elections processes are handled. In fact, earlier I'd wanted to rectify or correct the notion created by David Kosing that we are headed into a crisis. This is a democratic process. There are laws and rules that govern every electoral process. The first is you go to the Supreme Court if you feel that the process was not fair, which was done. The Supreme Court then has different things to do. It could either order for a recount or a re-election. In this case, it ordered for a fresh election. Now, that said, the third respondent in that case, Raila Odinga, felt that that was not right. He had IEBC to blame, even though the Supreme Court, because it did not have the prosecuting powers, or investigative powers, did not find anyone culpable. He feels a few people are culpable, and so he says, I cannot trust this process. Now, as Brian had earlier intimated, and as I said earlier, in 2013 a ruling was rendered that asked Raila to accept the defeat and move on. And in that ruling, what had happened is that because it was a unanimous ruling, the judges penned that in the event that an election were to be held, a fresh election were to be held, or a rerun, and one of the candidates boycotts the election, then a fresh presidential election will ensue from the nomination stage. So that's the law. No crisis. The law is very clear. Trouble is, I think, the two dissenting judges who, by and large, may have seemed, at least, to side with the Jubilee or IEBC, were part of that unanimous ruling, and so they cannot, weave themselves out of it, and that's probably what
I'll allow you to respond to that, Christine, now that your name has been mentioned. Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri, are you worried as Jubilee that indeed NASA may make good their threat not to participate in this election, and what would be the implications for you as a party?
Well, let me see this as a party, and I agree with Nikia. I also agree with David and also the lawyer here. I agree with them 100%. There is problem. The lawyer is saying here there is a problem in the constitution is silent. I agree. They are saying they will not go in the election. There are some areas they need to be clear. I agree. Let me ask you only one question. Who is supposed to do it?
Who is supposed to do what?
Who is supposed to amend so that those things they are complaining, who is supposed to amend those things?
A referendum.
It's not an activist. It is not an analyst. They will do it. The Constitution says it is only the Parliament. Am I right? It's only the Parliament. You see now, if they are saying they will go and remove people from IBC by force, the procedure must be followed. And that's why you see the stand of Jubilee. And I agree with my friend here. He is taking interpretation, this document, interpretation, because you don't want to go in the street. He is taking this interpretation. Can I be helped by the court interpretation of this? We are not going in the street because it will not amend this.
Right.
You will not get the edge of this.
This is that to the anti-IEBC protest. That's what you're talking about.
Yes. You see the other one, Chipkati. Was he not in the court the other day for interpretation? Why are we going in the street banning Kisumu, routing? Is that interpretation? That is not interpretation. We must agree. Interpretation, there's a procedure. Muli, you are here. You don't tell me that even your boss can come and sack you like, get out, get out. There must be a procedure. They must tell you, Muli, we don't agree with you because of that. There must be a procedure. And the procedure is what we are saying now, what he's doing as a member of parliament. We don't know, maybe what do we do if this would happen? And we want to help them. Then they come and participate what they want. If they want anything more than that, go in the court, get court orders. Alternative, come in the parliament, let's discuss. We open for public participation. People came, church came, everybody came to participate. Then now it's going the floor. Let's go in the floor. And it is unfortunate. Brian Weke will not be there.
Brian Weke, I see you.
He will not be there. He will not be the street making noise. But he will not be in the parliament.
What's your reaction to Ngunjiri's statement?
I think first, the reason why I was looking at the Constitution is because Ngunjiri has actually, Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri has said that it is only
the second time.
Yeah.
To repeat that.
And I respect that. Again, I'll repeat. Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri has alluded to the fact that it's only Parliament who can change the law.
Which is what?
And look at Article 255, 256, 257. There are certain articles of the Constitution that Parliament has no capacity, nor capability, nor ability or authority by the law to change. That can only be done by the people of this country. So it cannot, I am coming back to issues slowly. So you cannot sit on national TV.
When you say the people, you're talking about a referendum.
There are two levels of amendment of the Constitution. Through a parliamentary initiative and through the popular initiative. And us as Kenyans, we are allowed to do that. So I just wanted Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri to understand that.
Kenyans are exhausted. You had Uhuru Kenyatta talk about this. Kenyans are exhausted. Do you really want this nation to take that route?
Now let's you know.
Let's hear from Nakia.
No, I'm coming. I think I was on the floor before Nakia. Before you bring in Nakia.
Ask you some questions.
I think let's
ask a question.
They're different initiatives. And I respect Mheshimiwa Kosing's initiative because he's trying to deal with certain lacunas in the law.
Yes.
But rules of the thumb. Number one, you cannot go to High Court to amend the decision of the Supreme Court. That can never happen. If the Supreme Court has addressed itself to that particular matter, you cannot purport to go to High Court to amend to amend the interpretation of the Supreme Court.
What is your point, Brian?
That's not correct.
No, my point is this. I think it is important for us to stop grandstanding in this country. It is important to stop the grandstanding for NASA and Jubilee, for members of parliament and the people. We need to come together as a country. I just want to confirm to these guys that we do not have a crisis yet. But we are headed to a crisis.
Come together as a country would mean dialogue. The international community...
And dialogue does not mean Nusumkate.
The international community has appeared here, has actually come out to say that they will not support calls, for instance, by Jubilee to amend the electoral laws. They're also calling for you as NASA to respect the IEBC's mandate to carry out this process, and therefore the stakeholders really steering clear of this deadlock between, on this stalemate between both sides of the political divide. So how does this dialogue then happen?
And I want to agree with them. And you see, again, first, I don't speak for NASA. I have not been appointed to speak for NASA. I only speak for the people of this country.
Which one?
You know, with which mandate?
Which mandate?
You see, that's where you
guys...
It's
true.
That's an unfair question.
That's where you guys go wrong. You can only speak to people of... You can only speak to... You should have said, I'm a journalist.
Brian,
don't address me.
Now,
let's proceed.
Yeah, for me, the way forward would be, let us call on all stakeholders, be it civil society, be it faith-based organizations, be it two formations, so that we can agree on certain bare minimums.
Well, let me say
in terms of reforms.
I agree with Brian to an extent, where there needs to be a collective conversation that happens. But it seems that both sides have dug in their heels and are very clear about their positions. And there was just a statement by Jubilee the other day where, you know, clergy tried to get involved, and Jubilee basically said, stay in your place. This is a political matter. So yeah, we can call in the question of having a collective conversation between all of the parties concerned, but the truth of the matter is that when you have one party saying you need to stay in your place and not be involved in this conversation, or you have NASA saying, you know, we're not going to come to the table, IABC, or really be amenable to any of these things unless you change, you're at a stalwart. You know, you hit a wall. And so while I think in theory these collective conversations are great, in reality it seems to be a really, really hard impasse, and one that's heading really quickly into a constitutional crisis.
We'll be talking about what could likely be a constitutional crisis very shortly. I'll be coming back to you, Mheshimiwa Kosing, but before that, Moses Kuria is appearing before the NCIC on hate speech charges. Makori Ongechi is our man on the ground. Makori, what's happening?
Well, good morning to you, Lillian. We are coming live from the NCIC offices, where Gatundu South MP, our legislator Moses Kuria, is expected to be summoned this morning by the commissioners over remarks he is alleged to have made against opposition leader Raila Odinga. Moses Kuria, we are told he appeared here yesterday, but in absence of his lawyer, and so he's appearing today to help with the investigation that the commission is conducting towards the remarks he made. And of course, we've been told that the Homa Bay women representative Gladys Wanga is also expected to appear before this commission this morning, also over the remarks she is alleged to have made. And therefore, we are expected to see them move in anytime now as they enter to maybe get the commissioners with the information that they are looking forward to help them with the investigations. Lillian.
Makori Ongechi there at the NCIC, where Gatundu South Member of Parliament Moses Kuria has responded to the recent summons over hate speech. Speaking after landing an invite to appear, or after being summoned to appear before the National Cohesion and Integration Commission over hate speech remarks he allegedly made on the 25th of September against NASA leader Raila Odinga, Kuria claims that he actually did not incite anyone into violence, and his message message was only directed at people who cannot be incited. We're staying with that developing story. Back here in studio, Mheshimiwa Kosing, your response to David Osiani's comments earlier, and indeed to Nakia here, saying that we could be headed into a political crisis.
Thank you, Lillian. And before we address that, I think I want to make certain clarifications. Number one, the idea which is being raised that, oh, you know, when there's one boycott, then we go back to nomination. That is based on or before 5th of September. You know, both candidates have already been nominated, so there's no boycott, right? If you look at it legally. If then, what would have happened for that, maybe perhaps to trigger, is if he refused that nomination at that date.
And NASA has been clear in stating that they have never used the term boycott.
That's what I'm saying. That idea of forcing this election not to happen through those shenanigans, to me, in my view, has been already addressed by Gazette Notice number 8751. And therefore, we are looking at a position, or we are looking at a reality, increasingly, where we will go for an election, or the ballot paper will have two people, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Even if Raila Odinga is going on saying, you know...
Unless he formally withdraws, he will be on the ballot.
Formally withdrawing. Yeah, unless he formally withdraws. And when he withdraws, then we will, that means that he's nullifying his nomination under that Gazette Notice 8751. And when he does that, then 138 comes in, where Uhuru Kenyatta is going to be declared the president-elect. That is exactly what's going to happen. There's no lacuna anywhere. And therefore, the issue of boycott increasingly is out of order because already it's been gazetted. Going further, I was almost asking my friend Weke who he represents and whether he has been given proper instructions. But now he's declared himself. He said already, no, I'm not going to be in this. But Lillian, I think for the country and for the benefit of the nation, unless we agree that NASA are not interested with the election, unless we agree that principle, we will stop forever.
Let me read something out to you here that's coming in from our news desk. According to Article 290, judgment on the then presidential election petition. Let's suppose, however, that the candidate or a candidate who took part, and I think, Brian, you quoted this, who took part in the original election dies or abandons the electoral quest before the scheduled date, then the provisions of Article 138, Clause 1b would become applicable with fresh nominations ensuing. It also said, therefore, this means that if Raila Amolo Odinga pulls out, then Article 138 kicks in, and therefore this election season seemingly far from over.
That is interpretation. That is interpretation.
You believe this is interpretation?
Yes, that will be interpretation, and that is interpretation of one person.
This is what the law actually states.
No. Actually, you see, allow me to say.
For 2013, and that is paragraph 290. And that's what we are saying. You know, IBC has set up a very dangerous precedent that in the event that the constitution is not very clear, they resulted into the 2013 decision.
You are not clear on the fact that the reading of Article 138 has no sub-article 1b, that it remains silent.
No. 138b is very clear. That, and that's what you see, that the 290 is the paragraph 290 of the is actually 290 of the Supreme Court ruling, and it is now referring to the fact that if a candidate dies, and in this scenario we only have Raila Odinga or Uhuru Kenyatta, who is not dead, or one pulls out. So if one pulls out, then fresh nominations has to ensue, as provided for in our constitution under Article 138. And that's where the problem is. The law does not provide for the constitution that in the event the Supreme Court nullifies the presidential election, it is very quiet. And that's the reason why we will have to strengthen those systems moving forward. It is not about...
Talking about strengthening those systems, let's go to the fact that the two select committees of Parliament formed to oversee the implementation of the Election Laws Amendment Bill 2017 are expected to table their report today, and this signals the determination by the Jubilee leadership to amend the election laws before the repeat presidential election. The tabling of the report seeking changes in the electoral laws coming just 15 days to the repeat of the presidential polls slated for the 26th of October. David, the IBC, the opposition, members of the international community have raised questions over the timing of these amendments, arguing it is too close to the election. The opposition threatens to challenge this in court. In your opinion, are these laws ill-timed?
Lillian, history is wrought with examples of such misgivings that were done by different people selfishly, to do things for themselves. In 1963, Tom Mboya was then running to be the Secretary General of KANU, and he wanted to cut to size Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and so what he proposed to Kenyatta was to create 8 vice chair positions so that he would dilute Jaramogi Odinga's influence, because then that would give him the natural standing to prepare for the presidency. He never saw the presidency. Earlier on, we saw Bonnig Halwale, the former senator of Kakamega. When governors were first elected, he was one of the champions for trimming the powers of governors. Bonnig Halwale fought governors even flying the national flag. Simple things. Later, he would run to be governor. Before 2010, as the constitution was being made, Senator Kiraito Murungi, then an MP, decided to fight the Senate as being the upper house. The committee of experts holding a meeting in Naivasha consulted them as the constitutional committee of parliament. And Kiraito Murungi, then a member of parliament, said the Senate cannot be an upper house. What ended up happening? He could not fall back on being an MP. He had to run for Senate. Now Anne Waiguru, Minister for Devolution, was a great lady, did not have time for governors, frustrated them, never even paid a courtesy call on one governor. What would happen lately? She is now a governor. She now needs those powers. She now needs those funds. This is what the law is. When you want to make a law, do it and always remember that at some point it could be in the hands of your greatest enemy. Whenever we create laws, we must envisage a situation where we are now the ones on the receiving end. This electoral laws being fiddled with currently are extremely ill-timed. They are to try and secure a falsified victory of Jubilee, and when they do it, I want them to imagine that in 2022 one of them will run for presidency, probably the deputy president. And when he runs and these same laws will be in place, they will be the same laws that will crucify him.
Is Parliament acting in the best interest of the nation? Are these laws being made in good faith, or are they designed to suit partisan interests?
I think they're designed to suit partisan interests. I mean, that's really clear. To try to table or push forward legislation days before election is certainly self-serving, and it's unfair to the rest of the country, right? Because while democracy, I think, is important and we're able to change laws and amend laws, the self-serving law just days before the election is certainly unfair to the country. And again, I would have to agree with David in saying that, those laws can work in their non-favor, or can work against them later on. So you have to be really careful about how you change the laws, how laws are interpreted, and how they're facilitated throughout history, right? Because what you're doing now is just really myopic, right? So if they change the law now, it really is just a myopic view. It's not a full, broad view of how it impacts the laws in Kenya, how it affects the presidency and the future presidencies of Kenya. So I would be very careful, and certainly I'm an international person from the United States. I'm certainly concerned about the laws.
These are partisan interests. Jubilee, that's what Nakia is saying, that's what David is saying. Jubilee has majority numbers in Parliament, and therefore this really not being seen as being in the interests of the people of Kenya.
Let me say this, even in judiciary, Chief Justice, they have majority. They made the ruling with the majority. That's why we followed the law, what they passed.
But that's a stretch.
Just a minute.
That's a stretch.
We followed the majority. What they ruled, the Supreme Court, is what we followed. So the issue of saying that the majority, I don't know the what, I think it's not here or there, because we follow democracy.
That's abuse of majority.
That's a stretch. I think that's a stretch of the law.
Give me time. You are in America, there's a crisis of stealing the election.
Hey, listen, there's absolutely a crisis. No, there's a crisis with you. There's a crisis with you as well. I absolutely admit that there's a crisis in the United States.
Personal jabs,
If you pass along jabs, you should be able to take them.
I'm saying, we are Kenyans. Let's be left to do our own things ourselves. We know.
I'm a Kenyan just like you, and this is absolute democracy.
Can you give me time?
But don't take jabs.
Can you give me time?
Don't take jabs.
Okay.
I'm saying
no jabs, Mheshimiwa.
Okay, I agree. But also should not jab because we are Kenyans.
I'm not jabbing. You jabbed first. I jabbed back.
She's a professional, and that's why she's sitting on this
panel. But you see, what I'm saying,
yes.
What all of them, what they are saying, that there are some like Kuna and there are some areas to be changed. I agree with them. Who should do it? That's what I'm asking.
Parliament, you said that.
It is Parliament. It's not international, not activists. It is in the Parliament. And that's why you're saying they have members of the Parliament who are supposed to come today. Let's come and discuss and let them do amendment. Do you know in the floor you can do amendment? And it will be allowed. Put amendment and say this law, it is not good for Kenyans. Can we change here and there? And it will be listened in the floor. I think that's where we are going, and that's what you do. If you want this Kenya to be peaceful, let's agree the procedure. The judiciary said, Chief Justice, the procedure must be followed.
The opposition threatens to challenge the IBC in court, and away from that, away from the culture of petitions in this nation, let's talk about whether, in your view, Parliament is acting in the interests of people. We understand, of the people of Kenya, we understand that this afternoon the two select committees of Parliament will be tabling their report. This is 15 days to the elections. What's your opinion?
You know, Lillian, I want to agree with Mheshimiwa Ngujiri on a number of things. That one, we are a democracy as a country. That number two, democracy is about the rule of majority. But also minorities have to be listened to.
Of course.
I also want to accept that Parliament has the responsibility of changing laws, but again within the Constitution. However, let's be very honest. We are talking about electoral laws. We are talking about electoral system. We are talking about a system that will stand the test of time. Now, if you look at the Kriegler report, which is very clear, he said categorically that election laws should be done nearly a year to election, so that there is sobriety. It is about defending certain gains that have been made. But if you look at these laws, and let's be honest, you see there are a number of unconstitutional provisions. For instance, you want to usurp the powers of the chairman of the commission. If you look at Article 15 of the Constitution, it is very clear on how a chairman is supposed to be appointed, the qualifications. So again, what we are seeing, and let's remember where we've come from. The current laws that again were watered down towards December, we had a bipartisan Parliamentary Select Committee, which was chaired by Honorable Orengo and Kiraitu Murungi, that brought in place certain minimally agreed procedures and processes. Now again, because we have majority, we want to skew election laws so that again we plunge this country into chaos. I would want to urge my brother, because I know sometimes he can be very sober, and he has been sober on a number of instances. Let us
cannot say that. You are not my doctor to say that I'm not. Say that. Only my doctor who can say that.
We're going to have Mheshimiwa Kosing and then Gunjiri respond to this particular question. The IEBC is totally against these electoral law amendments. The opposition as well. Members of the international community, the civil society, a lot of observers away from the IEBC, a lot of observers, and even the other side of the political divide, totally against these amendments. Don't you think on your part as a party it is dictatorial to proceed with this process, knowing all too well that all these other observers are totally against this particular process?
You know, Lillian, first of all,
you are the ruling party, and therefore you have, you are well aware you have majority in Parliament, and therefore for you, don't you think that this is a dictatorial approach on your part?
First of all, we will not apologize for our numbers. That is it is true. That is a clear mandate from the people of Kenya. You know, they trusted Jubilee, and that is why we have the numbers, and we will use them prudently. Number two, and I think more important, and more important, yeah, and that is why we represent people who are elected by the people. I was elected by the people of Pokot South, and many others were elected by constituents. But above all that, I want to say this, Lillian. Why would people want to vilify Jubilee proposals? When it's NASA, oh no, let's listen. You know, reduce the minimum. In fact, they were 11. They went to 12. They went to 13. I think from UK, you will bring another 14 and 15 and forever. So why is it that if it's Jubilee proposing legally, it's a problem? Let me say this, Lillian, for the country and for the world, that Kenya is not in a normal election cycle. So we cannot be compared, and people coming with, oh, you know, this Jubilee are changing laws midstream and so on. We are in extraordinary situation. It requires extraordinary sober mind. We are the only country in Africa that has been in this scenario. We are only 3 in the world. So even when people say international practice, according to who or where? This is a different. We think about that country.
According to democracies that have.
Which democracies? There are only 3 countries. There are only countries which have been in this problem. If I call it problem, it's only 3, Lillian. Let us appreciate that first. And I want to correct also that notion that people say, oh, IEBC is against it totally. No, they were in the committee and made proposals. But let me go back and tell Kenyans. The committee, the joint committee which is presenting their report today is within the law. First of all, let's correct that notion. Article 124 is very clear, 1 and 2, that Parliament may establish joint committee consisting of members of both houses and may jointly circulate their procedure. That is the Constitution, and therefore they were jointly proposed, and they are legally. It's not a question of legality. They are legally.
I want to move to Jubilee's tour of the coast, Gunjiri. But your response to that, or your reaction to that as well.
Well, I'll say
I'm not concluded, Dylan.
Okay. Well, in conclusion.
Yeah. In conclusion, I think let's first of all understand that we are not in a normal election cycle. And a good example is we went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, you know what, there were some irregularities and transmission. 11,000 polling stations are not properly covered by network, and therefore there will be a problem of transmission. Are we going to wait and say let's go back in the same scenario? We must amend the law and provide for an alternative mechanism. Even Supreme Court said, what was that alternative mechanism? We have said it is manual, so that it is clear. Lillian, I want to ask you on behalf of Kenyans. If 11,000 polling stations are not able to transmit these things electronically, what are we going to do? We will be back again to Supreme Court. Why do we want to go there and yet we have Parliament running? Is it a problem to say we will transmit both electronic and is that a crime? Finally, if a polling clerk or returning officer or presiding officer does not sign this form, don't you think that we need some punitive measures so that it awakens them? What is illegally that? What is the problem with that? That is just streamlining the way so that we have a credible election on 26th.
I think we need to agree that we are only doing protecting this thing. But at the end of the day, we must know that there's a procedure. And I'm repeating that and again and again. We as a Jubilee, we are following procedure. We were told to go back for election. Our president is very busy, and even us, very busy to see how we can add the votes. Because we were ordered to do that. If there is any interpretation which is not clear, let people go in the court. Chipkat went in the court just the other day, I don't know whether yesterday, asking, what can I do if this crisis should come? Let people go in the court. If not in the court, let them come also in the parliament and advise their MPs who are elected, who are given power by the people. We are not doing for ourselves. And let me tell you, when we're in the parliament, there are many things which we also agree. Even if there is minority and they have their seat there, which nobody else can have that committee. They are there to check the county, to PSC, and the others to check how the government is working. Let's not work on. Last time they went to the president, preachers, and they told the president, can we change this because these people will continue the demonstration? And that's what I want to repeat to my brother. It was not done within the constitution. It was done outside. The president told us to rubber stamp that thing. We did it. He has already said that the criminal report said, unless of man. He is saying that. We did it within 7 months. These people even they have tried, less than 7 months, taking us in direction the way they have done. We need to respect them. If you don't want CEO, go in the court, come in the parliament, say those amendments you want. they will not be done in streets, in fighting. Let's come together, because after 26, Kenyans will be together. This is only the pressure of politics which is there.
David Ngunjiri says that Jubilee are extremely busy, and indeed 15 days to election day, Jubilee has pulled all stops and hit the campaign trail. NASA, on the other hand, very quiet, not campaigning aggressively, if anything at all. What we're seeing are press conferences, and now we understand that the NASA leader is planning a high-profile visit to the United Kingdom. What is NASA's game plan?
Well, I think NASA may be campaigning, but it's not necessarily that the NASA leader is leading the campaigns. So that's different. You have different members of parliament doing campaigns at different levels. I don't know. I don't speak for NASA. Okay. But what I want to say here is, Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri and all the others, these moments of crisis like this call for reflection and introspection, looking back about the journey we've traveled as a country and looking forward where we want to go. In the processes of trying to expand the democratic spaces for this country, different people have been called different names. They've been called detractors. When Kenyatta was fighting for the independence of this country, the whites called him a leader unto darkness and unto death. But when we got the independence, we celebrated. In 1992, when the bearded sisters, Gitobu, Anyang, Raila, Martha Karua, fought for a new constitution, what ended up happening? They were called enemies of the country, sent by the Western detractor countries. Now we enjoy the fruits of democracy. I want to call us to sit down and think about the country more than the grandstanding about who gets power. I want us to take advantage of this moment of crisis to sort out the bigger problems. Let's not behave the way, for example, there was crisis last time in the University of Nairobi. Police went in, beat students. I was a former president of SONU, and that was very upsetting. Now what happens thereafter? Instead of reaching out to the chief security officer who invited police to the very sacred precincts of the school, what happens? You now have a gentleman who is a vice chancellor being put on the, being sent to the hangman simply for being a Kamba, and because he has had a history of fights with the powers that be in government running the institution. That's not right. You want to take advantage of those moments of crisis. You want to take moments of that. You want to take advantage of these moments of crisis to be at your fairest, at your finest, and at your most memorable. That when Mheshimiwa Kosing will eventually leave here, he will be remembered not for being a mere, a mere stooge of the state trying to pursue very parochial interests.
NASA not campaigning?
Absolutely. I have answered that in my estimation, I think NASA is campaigning, but what we get to campaign is Raila being on the ground. NASA has structures in the grassroots to campaign. MCAs, MPs like Mheshimiwa Ngunjiri here, he doesn't need to be with Honorable the President in Mombasa. But I know he is campaigning. But you are campaigning in Bahati for him. I've not seen you in campaigns with him everywhere. So essentially what I'm saying, the models of campaign, we do not know. Why NASA is campaigning, get their communication experts to come and tell. But what I want for this country is a focused leadership offered by both in Jubilee and in NASA for the sake of the country.
As a political strategist, what do you think is the deal with NASA? What's up with the silence? What's up with their almost aloof approach to this political process?
I said this earlier. I think, just in the approach that NASA appears to be taking it, and certainly there could be something that's happening on the ground that no one in the country knows about, or no reporters are writing about, or no bloggers are mentioning. So there could be something that is happening. I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know. But I think that NASA is really holding kind of their cards close to the vest and trying to figure out kind of very last minute what they're going to do. What the poker card they're going to pull out to kind of upset the flow of the election coming up. I mean, but listen, it's a democracy in Kenya. You have a right to protest. You have a right to boycott. It's enshrined in the Constitution. As Parliament has the right to change the laws, that is also enshrined in the Constitution. They are legislators. So, again, in terms of NASA and what they're doing, and I have no idea, but one, I do think that they're being really kind of cheeky about their political process.
No reforms, no election. No election, no need for campaign.
No election.
No election, no need for campaign.
So and I think every journalist in this country has asked the question, what does that mean? What does no election mean? What powers do you have to stop an election?
Let's be very honest. If you look at the Constitution, it is the prerogative of IBC, not even Supreme Court or courts or Parliament, it is the prerogative of IEBC to declare when elections are. And they've been very clear, and they've pronounced themselves to that matter. Now, the simple question that you've asked is, why is NASA not campaigning? And I'll tell you very easily. People in this country, they've made up their minds, regardless of where you go. It does not matter whether Raila campaigns in central Kenya or in Mount Kenya region. We know what will happen. And I can tell you for a fact, people have already made up their minds.
And by that you mean?
No, by that I'm just trying to say, it does not matter how you campaign or wherever you visit. People have already made up their minds. They know who they are going to vote for. However, let me be very honest, if I were to advise the NASA team, it is only a stupid man or woman who can go for these elections with the current IEBC as constituted. Look here, it is very clear that the Supreme Court, in the history not only of this country but of Africa, has never nullified an electoral a presidential election. So why do you want Raila to campaign? For what? With the same team, so that the same processes and procedures can be dealt with? Unless there is accountability on the part of the commission, I would advise them not to waste their time to campaign and subsequently be part of that election.
As we take a break,
when you are calling us here, don't come and tell us here, analysts. We know very well the ODM, let them come with their position, not to come and hide themselves like this. They are analysts. You can see even the people who are hearing. They know that.
So you're talking about Brian Weke. You're saying he's not
neutral. Let's have somebody neutral like her.
He's not neutral.
He's advising it openly.
I know. It's convenient too.
But William, as you take break, this needs to be corrected. This needs to be corrected. No, it cannot be consumed by Kenyans. What my brother here, Wakili, I think it is wrong to say that it is a stupid Kenyan who will go for this election. That is wrong. And I think he needs to apologize. That is wrong. Millions of Kenyans are going to turn for election on 26th. Are those stupid people? Are Kenyans stupid? Just because you have been given...
No, that TV-friendly language.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. But that's what the word is used. That a Kenyan who will participate in this election is only stupid. He needs to withdraw that. Withdraw that. I think he needs to withdraw.
I think
to use a good language.
You
are a gentleman, my brother.
Brian Weke, please.
You're not the moderator in this. Yeah, let's
withdraw.
What I said,
it's not correct.
And I will say it again, and I would advise, if I was a candidate, unless the commission is reformed, I would not participate in those elections.
That's fair.
Whether intelligent or otherwise.
But not stupid.
I will not.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I come to
that is the intention that NASA has by calling for this mass action and the anti-IEBC protest.
Because we need a credible institution with the credible laws to deliver a credible election.
Maybe the fact that you're holding the country ransom, that Kenyans want their lives to go on.
Now,
yes.
Do you know, by the way, Lillian, we don't even need to go to the street protests. It just needs the commission, who are the commissioners, to say, look here, there is a problem here, and here, and here. And sit down and say, you don't even need to resign. Step aside.
Yeah.
If you ask me, Chebukati had a brilliant idea to create a project team that is independent, that will deal with these issues. And if I were to advise the Jubilee, because if I say I'm advising, if I were, because they are saying, if I were to advise Jubilee, if you ask me if they believe they have numbers, then they ought to create an independent process so that if they win, their win is not questionable. And that is where the discussion should be.
But Jubilee is not IEBC, my brother.
No.
And we don't control
it. It is about saying we agree.
When we come back, we'll be talking about President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto having received more defectors from the National Super Alliance. While at the coast, on Sunday they received former Wiper Secretary General Hassan Omar to the ruling coalition. There have been other defections as well. We'll be looking at the implications of that. Both Jubilee and NASA have been battling for the control of the coast. The opposition scooped most of the votes in the region in the August 8th polls. We'll be taking a look at the state of affairs there as Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy enter their third day at the coast. But before that, Mercy Chepkoech is in Kajiado. We're looking at the state of Nancy Chepkoech is in Kajiado. We're looking at the state of security there as the Nyumba Kumi initiative continues. Let's cross over there. Good morning, Nancy. What's the latest from Kajiado?
Good morning to you, Lilian Muli. Kitengela residents in Kajiado County have decided to invest on security in order to curb the insecurity incidences in the locality. We managed to talk to some of the officials of Kitengela Estate, that's Kitengela Heights. They formed a community policing led by the chairman, David Mutai. Mutai said that the insecurity cases are rising day by day because of the high population in the town. He also said that the estate committee have managed to buy some watchdogs, though some are trained while others are not because of the funds, because of the challenge of the funds. Other members too say that they are moved on investing heavily in security, work hand in hand with the security forces in the locality, so that it may ease the moving up and down because of the businesses, because of the vandalism that is going on in the Kitengela town. So that is why the estate have decided to invest a lot on security matters. Lillian, also, the ICE estate managed to build a booth whereby cases of the theft can be recorded by the residents living in the estate. Though they have the challenge of funds and also challenge of communication, the communication breakdown. So the Kitengela security team, comprising of Nibakumi Initiative and community policing, are working hand in hand with the National Security Committee to curb the issues of robbery in the town and its environs. The technology to have helped in reducing and even solving insecurity matters. The members of security team Kitengela formed a WhatsApp group called Kitengela Securities, which helps in highlighting issues of security, circulating stolen vehicles or items, raising alarm to the chairman of the community policing. And according to the residents, their unity have really helped in curbing the insecurity issues. We also managed to talk to the admin of the Kitengela Security group, the WhatsApp group. They also told us the technology has really helped because of the networking. Said that the chairman of the estate communicates to the members of the estate, so they raise the alarm and form something like a Nimbakumi. So the chairman, Mr. David, also told us that they are planning to invest on street lighting, foot patrols by the wazir in the security committee. I also managed to talk to the Deputy County Commissioner of Isinya, David Kikeme, who said that the security begins with the person and not a group. He also uploaded the networking of community policing in some areas in Kitengela and other Kenyans to emulate the same. He also said that the estate should also try and interview the watchmen, the house girls, because the security begins in the house, in the home, not from outside. So he also encouraged the estate to erect security lights, and also security lights, many compounds, and also invest a lot on dogs, especially trained dogs. William.
Thanks for that. That's Nancy Chepkoech in Kajiado. We're looking at the state of security there. In the next hour, we'll be talking about Jubilee's trip to the coast. President Uhuru Kenyatta, accompanied by his deputy William Ruto, are in the coast. This is their third day of their tour there. We'll be looking at the implications of that particular trip by the Jubilee Brigade. That's when we come back. David Citizen Extra.